There is a setup in your kitchen right now worth less than $2 that generates real, measurable electricity. Salt, water, two different pieces of metal. That is it. Alessandro Volta built the first continuous electric battery with exactly those three things in 1800. His original device is sitting in the Smithsonian Institution right now, fully documented, fully verified, 225 years old. And the energy industry has never once mentioned it to you. Not in a bill, not in a brochure, not in a school curriculum. Because a solution this cheap cannot be sold in a bottle for $30 a month. They did not remove this from classrooms because it stopped working. They removed it because the moment a person understands that electricity is a chemical reaction between two metals and a salt solution, a reaction you can replicate for under $2, they start asking questions the industry cannot afford to answer. Questions like, why does a standard AA battery cost $3 when the principle behind it is 225 years old and requires materials worth 11 cents? What cannot generate a recurring revenue stream gets buried from public knowledge. That is the operating formula. It has never changed. Your utility company has sent you hundreds of bills in your lifetime. They have never once explained what electricity actually is. Not once. Stay here with me. The vault is just opening. Welcome to Forbidden Camping, where we excavate what the industry buried and hand it to you for less than a hardware store trip. We do not sell energy freedom. We teach the physics, the history, and the practical application of knowledge that was systematically removed from public education by documented budget decisions. Subscribe now. Because what we are going to cover includes the documented NSF budget cuts that eliminated hands-on science from American classrooms, the electrochemical principle behind every single battery ever manufactured, and the exact $2 experiment that Volta demonstrated to Napoleon Bonaparte himself in 1801. Here is what they removed from the curriculum. In the winter of 1780, an Italian physician named Luigi Galvani was dissecting a frog in his laboratory in Bologna. His assistant accidentally touched the frog's exposed sciatic nerve with a metal scalpel, while a static electricity machine nearby discharged. The frog's leg kicked, hard, as if it were still alive. Galvani spent the next decade on that observation. His conclusion: animal tissue contained a vital electrical fluid. He called it animal electricity. He was wrong about the mechanism, but he was right about something far more important. The metals were doing something. The discovery that would power the entire industrial civilization of the 19th century came from a dead frog in a bowl. And for over 200 years, that story has been reduced to a footnote in a biology textbook, not a physics experiment you can replicate, a paragraph you memorize for a test. Alessandro Volta understood what Galvani had actually found. In 1799, after years of systematic experimentation, he realized the electricity was not coming from the frog. It was coming from two different metals touching each other in the presence of moisture. The frog was not the source. The frog was the conductor. In 1800, Volta constructed his device, the voltaic pile. The Smithsonian Institution holds an original example in its collection. Catalog number N-M-O-H-A-J-J-A-S-N-Z-32-89. Discs of zinc, discs of copper, cloth soaked in brine, salt water, stacked in alternating layers, connected by a wire. It produced continuous electric current for the first time in human history. The Royal Society of London published Volta's letter on March 20, 1800. Within weeks, Nicholson and Carlisle had built their own version and used it to split water into hydrogen and oxygen for the first time in history. Every battery in your car, your phone, your laptop, Every single one operates on the same galvanic cell principle Volta demonstrated in 1800 with salt water and two pieces of metal. So why does almost no adult alive today know that they can replicate the foundational experiment of electrical civilization in their kitchen for less than $2? Because knowing the principle is not profitable. Buying the product is. Before we go deeper, the vault. Members of this channel have access to the off-grid water purification protocol, the passive cooling construction manual, the natural mold elimination field guide, and the full earth battery installation sequence for continuous low-draw power from nothing but damp ground and two metals. Everything in the vault costs less than $30 to implement. Everything was buried by an industry that profits from you not knowing it exists. The link is below. But stay here, because what comes next is the part that should genuinely make you angry. Not at a company, at a documented, dated, funded decision to remove this knowledge from the classroom. When you place copper and zinc into a salt solution and connect them with a wire, you create what electrochemists call a galvanic cell. Zinc is more electrochemically reactive than copper. When zinc contacts the salt solution, it begins to oxidize. It releases electrons. Those electrons cannot travel through the liquid. They can only travel through the external wire. That flow of electrons is, by definition, electric current. The salt water is not generating electricity. The salt water's the electrolyte, the ionic solution that completes the internal circuit. Without it, no pathway. No pathway, no current. The zinc-copper pairing produces a theoretical cell voltage of 110 volts. A standard AA alkaline battery produces 5 volts. The principle is identical. The chemistry is optimized. The galvanic cell principle has not changed in 225 years. A single cell in salt water produces between 0.76 and 1 volts, enough to register on a multimeter, enough to power a low-draw LED, not enough to charge your phone, and the zinc electrode corrodes as it operates. The galvanic reaction is consuming the metal to release the energy. Nothing is free. Accessible, replicable, understandable electricity is the right description. The Exploratorium in San Francisco uses the 5-cell saltwater battery as a standard introductory electrochemistry demonstration. 5 zinc-copper cells in series produce 5 to 5 volts, enough to illuminate an LED with unmistakable brightness. Their protocol is publicly available. Their materials cost under $15. Your utility company understands galvanic cell chemistry at a graduate level. They have never sent you an educational pamphlet explaining any of it. Not one in the entire history of the residential electricity market. The absence of that education is not an oversight. It is a business decision. Here is the timeline. Every date is documented. Every number is sourced. Between 1956 and the mid-1970s, the National Science Foundation invested $117 million in practical, hands-on science curriculum for American schools. It was a direct response to Sputnik in 1957. The United States government was genuinely afraid its population did not understand science, so they funded physics labs, chemistry experiments, electrochemistry demonstrations, the kind of science where a student puts 2 metals in salt water and watches a needle move and understands in their body, not just in memory, that electricity is a chemical reaction. By the mid-1970s, according to records in Education and Urban Society, the momentum of those programs had largely disappeared. The hands-on curriculum was being quietly replaced by textbook coverage. That was the first wave. The second wave arrived in January 1981. Ronald Reagan submitted a budget that cut the NSF education allocation from $70 million to $10 million, an 85% reduction in a single budget cycle. The Christian Science Monitor reported on it in April 1981. Every NSF program for K-12 science education was eliminated. Teacher training institutes, gone. Curriculum development grants, gone. Laboratory equipment programs, gone. Why does almost no American adult own a multimeter and know how to use it? Because in 1982, the government decided training science teachers and funding laboratory equipment cost too much money. The third wave arrived in January 2002. The No Child Left Behind Act made standardized testing in reading and mathematics the primary metric for school funding. Science was not on the test in the early grades. Science disappeared from the early grades. The National Research Council documented this in their 2011 report. Science was in large part squeezed out of the elementary curriculum as a direct consequence of the emphasis on tested subjects. Three waves: 1974, 1982, 2002. Each one moved the curriculum further from laboratory and closer to memorization. The result is a generation that can pass a science test without having ever experienced science. In 1801, Napoleon Bonaparte attended a public demonstration of Volta's battery at the Institut de France and served as a laboratory assistant. If the experiment was accessible enough for Napoleon's court in 1801, it was accessible enough for your fifth-grade classroom in 1975. It stopped being accessible the moment it stopped being funded. Here is what you can build in the next 15 minutes. 1 galvanized nail, zinc-coated, every hardware store, under $1. 1 length of copper wire or a copper coin, water, table salt, a multimeter, any basic digital model under $15. Fill a container with water, add 2 tablespoons of salt, stir until dissolved. Submerge the nail and the copper wire so they are in the salt water, but not touching each other. Connect your multimeter leads to the exposed ends of each metal, above the water line. Read the display. You will see a number between 0, 7, and 1 volts. That is the electrochemical potential difference between zinc and copper. The same number Volta calculated in 1799, appearing on your screen 225 years later because the physics has not changed. That number is electricity. The voltage was always there in every piece of zinc and copper on the planet. No one taught you to look. For 5 cells in series, follow the Exploratorium's publicly available protocol. Positive terminal of one cell to the negative of the next. 5 cells produce between 3, 5, and 5 volts. Connect that to a standard LED and it lights up. Volta's 1800 device, rebuilt in your kitchen with $15 of hardware store materials. When you watch the zinc nail corrode over the following hours, you understand physically what a battery is doing when it dies. It is not running out of electricity like a tank running out of gas. It is consuming itself. This is why lithium battery degradation over charge cycles is not a defect. It is the chemistry. That intuition costs 20 reais and 45 minutes. I need to be honest with you about one thing. Saltwater galvanic cells are not a power source for your home. The electrochemical stability limit of water-based electrolytes, approximately 23 volts per cell, is a hard physical constraint, not an industry restriction. The lie I will not tell you is that this replaces your power bill. The truth I will tell you is that the principle behind this experiment is the principle behind every significant electrical storage technology in current development, including the solid-state batteries that will power the next generation of electric vehicles. That is not a consolation prize. That is the point. The generation alive today has access to more electrical technology than any generation in human history. Every pocket holds a device with more electrochemical engineering than existed anywhere on Earth in 1900. And the overwhelming majority of people carrying those devices have no working understanding of what a battery is, why it dies, or what chemical principle it operates on. This is not coincidence. Why does every camping store sell you a $40 battery pack instead of a $15 kit that teaches you to build one from salt and metal? Because the $40 pack generates recurring revenue. The $15 kit generates understanding, and understanding is the one thing that cannot be patented. Volta did not have a wall outlet. He had curiosity, 2 metals, and salt water. The gap between him and you is not resources. It is not intelligence. It is the systematic removal over 5 decades of the educational infrastructure that would have handed you this knowledge at the age of 10. The knowledge did not disappear. It was removed from the curriculum, not from physics. It is in the Smithsonian's catalog. It is in the Exploratorium's free educational materials. It is in a galvanized nail and a piece of copper wire sitting in salt water on your counter. It has been waiting for 225 years. The only thing that changed is what we were taught to look for. Pause this video. Go to your kitchen. Salt, water, a galvanized nail, a copper wire, or coin. Less than 5 minutes to assemble the device that started the electrical age. Go. When you come back, put your voltage reading in the comments. This channel does not need a laboratory. It has your kitchen. If you made it to this point, you now understand the electrochemical principle behind batteries better than the overwhelming majority of adults who use them every day. Subscribe. Share this with someone who has paid electricity bills for 30 years without knowing what electricity is. Every person who finds this information is one less customer for the industry that buried it. Every share preserves what they invested decades to erase. 6 weeks after Volta published his battery in 1800, 2 British scientists named Nicholson and Carlisle connected one of his cells to a cup of water and watched it separate into 2 gases, hydrogen and oxygen. They had just performed the first electrolysis in history. That experiment is the operating principle behind every hydrogen fuel cell being developed today. The hydrogen vehicles that will replace combustion engines, the grid-scale energy storage that will replace fossil fuel peaker plants. In the next vault, we show you how to replicate what Nicholson and Carlisle did in your kitchen with the same device you just built, and why the industry developing hydrogen technology prefers that you think of it as exotic, expensive, and inaccessible. It is none of those things. The next vault opens soon, and what is inside is significantly heavier.